This is Ryther's executive functioning and behavioral health video podcast information for parents and providers in our community. I'm joined today by two really wonderful people. Ryther puts these video podcasts on, and we're just eager to share some of our therapists, some of our referring colleagues, folks in the community who've done this work. And I have today Mike Haken and Ruth Wilson, and they're going to be talking about maintaining the relationship with your child while also collaborating on tasks, asking for the child, teens or middle schoolers support in completing their tasks and their commitment to that. It can be very hard if you're talking about chores and homework and getting to school on time. And parents really have this balance, and caregivers, of making things work, getting the homework done, getting that middle schooler to school on time, while also maintaining the relationship, making sure that their child knows that the parent or caregiver is really on their team and working with them on these tasks and demands. And I am just so thrilled to have Mike Haken and Ruth Wilson today. They're experienced, excellent educators, and they're going to be talking about this topic. So, Ruth, do you want to introduce first?
Sure. Thank you, Ben. I'm Ruth Wilson. I'm a certified principal and teacher and also board certified educational therapist. Most of my career has been working with students in one-on-one instruction programs where we really control all the factors and tailor education to meet that student where they are. And so just my current school, the Polytech, even continues after graduation. We work with students through age 26. And in addition to one-on-one instruction, we have a driving simulator that helps students be able to practice driving and really get some confidence before they go out in the real world. So it is my great pleasure to talk with you all today, as I've had a lot of experience training teachers over the years with methods, ways to communicate, ways to teach when non-traditional methods don't work.
Thanks, Ruth. And you really have been a connector of kind of the therapy and mental health world and the educator world. Your initial school, EA2, which kind of grew into Brightmont, is just an amazing example of kind of how to connect with the kid, not just around academics and executive functioning, but as a whole person. And I'm so honored to have you here and what you do now with the Polytech and Huma Education and your coaching. So thank you so much. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself to the wonderful
You
viewers
bet.
out there?
Okay, I'm Mike Haken, and I've probably known Ruth for about 30 years, and I have great respect for her work and the work she does and the wisdom she brings. Myself, I've been in education and mental health, working with neurodivergent youth from pre-K through young adults for 45 years, and you do something long enough and you're bound to learn something. Hopefully I can pass along today some of what I've learned. For 23 years, I was at a school called Seattle Academy, building support systems and programs and supporting leadership. Currently, in my failed retirement, I'm consulting with kids, parents, schools, and agencies. And I'm also being a grandpa and producing educational courses through peopling.me. Something else that's relevant is as a kid, I skipped my first full day of school in second grade. I dropped out of school at age 15, and if you had told me then that I would spend my life working in education and in schools, I would have thought Satan had won.
Oh, Mike, it's so funny that you've had so many educational leadership roles, and I didn't hear this story about missing school on second grade and dropping out at 15. I do want to say I don't think your retirement's too failed because I saw some photos of you salmon fishing in Alaska.
Yeah.
So, have confidence. But again, folks, we're going to dive right in. These are really experienced folks, and I think what they see as educators is that parents balance and caregivers. You're trying to balance, like, I've got to get stuff done. I'm worried about how they're progressing. I need the dishes done. They're 14 and that's their chore. And just the functioning of things. You're balancing that with when I push on that and they've had a hard day, it can be really stressful. And we're going to dive right in on that. Mike, I think a lot of parents are probably wondering, they've had a hard time getting my young person to do homework and other tasks. What kind of things can they do where it feels like even kind of a simple request or simple demand feels like a lot of stress and tension in the household, and the parent wants to be on the young person's team, but it can really be a struggle.
Yeah, and parenting is a mix of joy, worry, challenges, and parenting neurodivergent young people comes with additional challenges. So I think the starting place that I want you to think about is I've been doing this a long time, and when I find perfection and divine enlightenment, I'll let you know. You want to give yourself grace. A starting place for working with your kids is digging into the why, the what, and the how. And so what do I mean by the why, the what, and the how? You're really trying to get an understanding of the lived experience of kids and why your kids are struggling and how that influences their learning, their ability to perform. It impacts their results, their self talk, their emotional struggles, and ultimately, all that surfaces for you as behaviors that concern you. So, kind of getting that window into their lived experience is really important. The what is comes when you understand what that lived experience is, you get clearer about what kinds of support they actually need and the how or what does that support look like in real time. So hopefully we'll get started on some of that conversation now. We often start with surface behaviors. We see behaviors that concern adults and educators, and the most common behaviors that arise are avoidance, deception, and denial. I want to talk about avoidance a little bit. I see avoidance coming really in three flavors. Reluctance is a response to or anticipating frustration, fear, failure, embarrassment, shame, guilt, anxiety, and stress. And so you'll see our kids avoiding tasks and they'll be underneath that reluctant. Then you'll see kids that are being resistant, and resistance tends to trigger pretty much every adult at some point. And what you want to understand about resistance is it's really the same as avoidance. The only major difference is the young person is feeling coerced to do things that are going to promote frustration, fear, failure, embarrassment, shame, guilt, etc. And so the last thing is passivity. And passivity is interesting because it's what kids do when all else fails. It improves absolutely nothing. And in fact, it makes things worse, but it does give one important thing to young people, and that's a sense of control. When they're feeling out of control, that passivity does give a sense of control. So when we see and experience behaviors, we all react kind of initially emotionally, but what I want to suggest that as parents, what you want to have that as a cue for is to try to take a look at what lies beneath. What is your kid experiencing, and how does that experience influence the behavior you see? So surface behaviors exist for kids as a response to pain. And it's important to understand that lived experience so you can better understand what it is that you want to do. So I want to talk about time for a minute. Whether you're talking inattention, stress, anxiety, learning disabilities, processing speed, working memory issues, you can go on, understanding nuance and abstraction, all those impact time. So you can have kids that are really working, really trying to understand and perform and produce, and they're still thinking about X when Y is now happening. And that's a really important factor for many, many neurodivergent kids. So what that does is it creates these gaps in their understanding understanding. So they're trying, they're working hard, and yet they're missing pieces. And that creates holes in concepts, skills, language, directions, and instructions. And that really exists like Swiss cheese. There are these holes, there's plenty of cheese, good stuff, feel like Swiss cheese, but these holes that exist, and they keep reoccurring with an unpredictable certainty that results in a sense of personal incompetence. So that lived experience ends up being painful, and that pain is to be avoided. Again, it impacts learning, production, results, the outcomes and feedback they're getting, and generates negative self-talk, negative
Yeah.
self-esteem, and emotion.
Yeah.
And so, want to move on now?
Well, I think what you've captured really well is just, an image of an iceberg for me is that there's the surface behavior that we see as adults and a lot beneath the surface, a lot of driving it. I mean, when you said avoidance, deception, and denial, that's a coping mechanism. It's also what I feel when I'm on the phone with a health insurance company. But these teens are reacting to their feelings. It's hard, and I think what you talked about of kind of really understanding the emotions that drive it and getting below that surface is so key for parents, educators, and therapists. So Ruth, Mike talked a little about kind of pain, and that when the adults kind of trying to collaborate, trying to help stuff get done, there can feel pain. There's stress. The young person is feeling stressed by the parent trying to monitor or support or help in whatever way they can. Often hear this term, like short-term pain for long-term gain. So meaning it's really hard to get a young person off screen sometimes, but if the parent stays firm and holds boundaries on that, there is a long-term gain. So Ruth, I think we're going to dive in on that, how to kind of get through that pain and kind of get some action, get some movement for that young person who might be really fighting a lot of tough emotions. Ruth?
Yeah, and Mike has done such a good job of framing up, regardless of what you see on the surface, a lot is happening behind the scenes. And so it's really important for the adult in the relationship to signal, I'm here with you. Like both sides are feeling this fear, uncertainty, difficulty, but it's not something you have to go through alone. I'm here with you. And one of the simplest strategies is just to ask for consent. Before springing a big conversation, you say, hey, do you have a few minutes for us to talk about what's going on? And what you're doing is you're giving a small amount of power to a person who doesn't have a lot. So if they say yes, you are golden. You're ready to have this conversation because they've kind of accepted where they are. But if they say no, accept that and say, okay, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to wind up what you're doing and get ready. And then we're going to have this conversation. And so that 10 minutes can make a lot of difference, but you're at the same time signaling, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm giving you a little bit of what you want. And then when you come back, you're more ready to actually have a conversation. And it's so important because a lot of times, if you just dive in with your questions, you get, I don't know. And the sad truth is, they may not know. They can't tell you for sure what's happening. They just know it's very uncomfortable right now. So this whole concept that sometimes you got to go slower to then go faster. So counterintuitive. But I've seen this a million times in tutoring where students come in, they've got to really fast, like an auctioneer, tell you everything that happened in their day. And if you don't give them that time to kind of download and process, they're not going to be able to do whatever task it is that I want them to do. So one of the best relationships is one of my instructors, Robert. We had a student come in for math right before a test, very high stress situation. It was the first time we'd ever met this student. And clearly there'd been a big argument in the car on the way over. And the mom could only sum it up by saying, he thinks he doesn't need tutoring, but I've brought him here. If he won't stay and walks home, that's okay. But I've done my best. And it's not really a good situation to start out with, but Robert kind of gave a nod and said, let's go. Those two sat pretty much in silence the whole session while the student worked on his own on the problems. And then at the end, Robert very quietly said, "Congratulations. I've been looking, all of those are right." And students about saying, "I told you, I just needed some time." And then Robert said, "But you know what? I've got another way you could do this that's a lot faster." And after that moment, now that the student wasn't stressed about getting the assignment done, he was able to actually hear. Those two became very good friends, worked together. And yet you could imagine if Robert had led with, "I've got a master's degree, I'm the expert, you need to listen to me," that student probably would have walked home that day.
Wow, Ruth. I mean, it really is about kind of meeting young people where they're at, really hearing from you. Just, let them kind of ease into things, right? It sounds like, and I think as parents, caregivers, we're often feeling pressure and we need to dive right in. And we just got an email from the school and math homework is due and we want to just solve it, right? So what I hear from you is like step out of problem solver mode and instead kind of let them navigate, let them lead a little, and then offer support, as that tutor Robert did. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ruth. Now, Mike, I know you have some thoughts to share about kind of scaffolding. We're talking about kind of helping a young person kind of go from a place where they're feeling like they're not accomplishing a lot and academics or other tasks are really stressful and kind of building up to more competency and hopefully mastery. What are your, what are you able to share with us about scaffolding?
Yeah, excuse me. For a lot of kids, when they're faced with tasks, they really need support in two major ways. They really need an executive assistant, somebody that helps them organize and prioritize so that they can get out of the starting gates
Hmm.
with the task that they want to do. Oftentimes, just the activities assigned to organizing and figuring out how to get to go really drain kids with a variety of learning challenges. So again, that executive assistant that helps you understand what to do, when to do, and how to do. And then really the other role that's really significant is that of the co-pilot. If you think about co-pilot and you're new to flying, for example, and you may have done well with the simulator and you've passed all your tests, but when it's time to go up, you don't have the repertoire that allows you to have the confidence and competence that you need. And it's a time of higher stress, so you may forget things and needs somebody to just kind of help and make sure you're tracking. So that notion of both an executive assistant and a co-pilot is a really valuable way to think about support, but also part of what happens within that is you're helping break down tasks and you're figuring out where holes are in concept, skills, vocabulary, directions, and instructions, and looking for both what's missing and misunderstanding. So, a quick anecdote: when I was teacher early on, was working with a young man that was having a horrible time with spelling and had done many remedial things and none of it worked. And he was an incredible reader. And at one point, I asked him, and nobody told me to ask him, and just that was a question in my head. Do you understand that you spell things the same way that you read them? And he looks at me and he says, "Oh, no, they're not." And I said, "Oh, really? What do you mean?" He says, "Well, there's all these rules." And I said, "Well, can you give me examples of rules?" He gave me all these wonderful spelling rules, and he was framing them accurately, but applying them incorrectly. So, when you get in there, how do you really begin to understand
Yeah.
more what's going on?
Well, and Mike,
Uh,
what I love what you're saying is really like breaking down tasks. And so, in this case, helping that student kind of understand things in a different perspective. And also, when we talk about scaffolding, it's making this huge task like catch up in math or increase a grade level in language arts. You're taking those large, scary things for the child, for the parent and caregiver, and making them into smaller things. With scaffolding, Ruth, how do you implement that? You know, how does the parent or caregiver put in small tasks into place? Because again, as educators, as coaches, we may be kind of working on this a lot, and we're in kind of our discrete time frame with the client, and we're breaking down tasks. What are some tips you'd have for parents or caregivers in terms of how they can break down tasks?
So breaking down the tasks is an important piece of that. Many students don't really see how to get in there and get started. And a second key component that Mike has explained with the co-pilot model is that you're there beside them. You don't break down the task and then give it to them. You're actually there. We would never build the scaffolding in the parking lot. We put it right next to the building. And so that support and encouragement is as much a part of the process as whatever you're doing. And whenever we ask someone to do something really hard, I think it's also important on the very beginning, before you're in the middle of the pain, to talk about the end. How do we know when we're done? Are we going to work for a certain amount of time? Are we going to work till this gets accomplished? And for me, I see teens and young adults, and sometimes I'm asking them to do something social that really stretches them outside of their comfort zone, like visit a college campus or go to a job fair. If I'm the ride or if I'm going to see them there, we decide a code word in advance. And if I hear this code word, I know you're getting overwhelmed and you want to go. So they know there's a way out. One of my personal favorite code words, a lot of my clients don't drink coffee. So I'm like, coffee's our word. If I hear you ask for a cup of coffee, it sounds so natural in conversation. It's easier for me to end to say, hey, we're going to take off. We're going to go get some coffee. And then we're going to go in the parking lot and talk about what just happened. Tell me what was going on here. And then I guess another.
Ruth, that's so important, because I think what you're getting at, like previewing it, talking about it in advance, and that's such an important thing for how a parent can put the scaffolding in place. Because a lot of times we feel like we're diving in and right away we're talking about the task. I love how you're talking about how a parent could kind of help their child see the end point, and kind of talk about what barriers might be. And previewing it, I think, really is that way to get that co-pilot on board. Mike, we talked to you about how to build and maintain a relationship, like really keeping that communication, that relationship with the child front and center, even though there are a lot of outside pressures or demands. It can feel really overwhelming. What do you say to that in terms of maintaining that?
There are two major pieces to this, but I kind of want to start with, we all want to be seen, heard, and valued, and kids are no different. We know that we care about kids, but they don't necessarily hold that understanding. And so making sure that we are communicating to them that we value and want to understand what's going on with their thoughts and feelings, and that we just value them being a part of our lives, is something that we know is a part of how we may feel, but they need to hear that and experience that. Also, I'd like to say that when you're communicating that, that is kind of an invitation, not an expectation. So if you're saying, I do care and want to hear what your thoughts and feelings are, we're all in this place where we may or may not know in any given moment what we're thinking and feeling, but it's important that somebody cares about that. So
Yeah.
it's communicating the caring. The other thing to do is to be valuing effort, so that kids really understand that the effort that they're putting in is recognized and is valued. The next major piece is listening and hearing. And when you understand and have that interest in the lived experience of a young person, you want to know that it's more than just that you're listening for more than just the words that are coming out of their mouth. You want to be understanding what they do and do not understand themselves. What is their nonverbal communication saying to you? What do they feel safe sharing? Do I
Yeah.
trust you enough to share? And can I admit things to myself? So the last thing I'll say about that is you want to be listening for not only what's said, but what's not said, what can't be said, and what a person cannot say to themselves.
Yeah.
And
Well, and Mike, that's so
finally,
important, because I think with teens, even the parent and caregiver knows them best in this whole world. There can be fluctuations day to day or week to week. There can be times where the teen's trying to communicate something. It's really hard. Thank you for saying that. And it brings us to our last question with Ruth. a lot of parents might be saying, okay, like I can see this on typical days. What happens when things go wrong? What happens when there's a really big, stressful moment? What happens when they're having a really hard morning getting to school and I've got to get them to school so that I can get to work? Ruth, what do you have for parents and caregivers in those tough moments?
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking when you worked really hard and then something just falls flat. And so it's really important to separate out the behavior from the kid, or it was the plan and not the person. So, I still care about you. We're going to figure out a way to solve this together. One fairly effective thing. Young people tend to think adults are always right and we know everything, and they don't have any insight into the problem solving process. So, a little apology. I'm sorry, I didn't think about factor X. That's on me. So, next time we're going to think about that. We're going to put that in our plan, and I'm going to be here with you doing it. And so, one fun analogy is just to think about parenting or any kind of caregiving the way a farmer would. I mean, farmers don't yell at plants. They look at what's going on and they say, oh, maybe you need something extra in your soil or in your water. And maybe I need to prop you up literally with a stake till you're strong enough to stand on your own. And they're not digging up their plant every day to see how it's progressing. They have faith that those roots are going to go deep, whether or not they see it, but I've got to give space. I got to give time for that to happen. And maybe the final thing, we all celebrate a good season, but farmers know there's good seasons and bad seasons. Sometimes things aren't going to go the way you want. And then you just communicate back, I'm still with you. This is still your child 1 year from now when you don't care about the math test, 5 years, 10 years. So that's
Yeah.
try to look long, think into the
That's
next
beautiful,
season.
Ruth. That's beautiful. So, folks, these were great questions. Um, Ruth and Mike, thank you so much. Your insights about being a co-pilot, about seeing other things that are going on for teens, and kind of how to communicate at these stressful points. I think all of our viewers appreciated that. Folks at home who are watching, stay connected with us at ryther.org, and we will have other videos as well. But again, I would love to close with what Ruth just said about taking that long view. That farmers, I think there should be a book called Farmer's Guide to Parenting based on what Ruth just said. But how beautiful, how powerful of kind of really taking that long view and knowing that the plant needs your support and maybe even scaffolding in the form of stakes and different food, different watering. But that it's not about the farmer's never going to yell at the plant, and the farmer is going to know there's tough moments and bad moments, seasons that are good, seasons that are bad, and really taking that long view. It can be really hard because you feel in the moment with your teen, you with your child, but parents, caregivers at home, others who are watching, I'm sure you really appreciated Mike and Ruth. Folks, thank you so much. Your insights were so helpful, and we're really grateful. That concludes this recording.